Hello and welcome to Shame to Shine. I'm Steph. I'm really happy to be here today with Rachael Rennebeck. Rachel is a podcast host, most notably of YaJagoff, and then also has done a collaboration with PittsburgHER. I'm so excited to have you on because of the stories that you have to share. So we're going to jump right in, Rachel, with this Shame to Shine series. Will you walk us through, knowing that women have faced multiple rounds of alchemizing shame? Will you walk us through what you want to share today about some shame you had prior that you've overcome?
Absolutely. And thanks so much for having me. It was really the word honor is used sometimes where you're like, really, is it an honor? It really is when there's so many outlets today and so many storytellers. So the fact that you thought of me is certainly appreciated. So thank you so much. I think that women wear so many different hats and women have been through so many different journeys that question could go to any facet, right? And so when I first read it, I thought, how is mine any different than someone else's? And in so many instances, it's not. We all have similar stories, just different examples, right? And so I think in this case, I chose to say, how do we accept the imperfections? Sort of a blanket statement. But I think that as women, specifically on PittsburgHER, we talk about generational gaps. We talk about transformation of just women's health. From being established from 1992 being the first time that women were even subject matters for health experiments. I mean, that's just ludicrous to me. So I think there's so many different facets. We've just looked at how do we perfect being this person, being a woman, being this gender. And in the world we live in, it's changing constantly. And I think my generation is really impactful in the sense that when I was younger, I'm a product of the 70s and 80s where it was a different time. And so to look at who I was then to what I am now or what I've become, all of those experiences have led me here with intent, but you don't realize it because you're learning as you go. And so I think that women have been told to be perfect in certain ways, whether you were going through my era of body image. I most recently reflected on LinkedIn on a professor who passed away of journalism, and he was fantastic. I learned so much from him. But my most memorable time with him was that he said to me, Hunt, do not go get married. If you're going to go get married, fine, but make sure you continue with this path. And I was so triggered by that because I was like, why is he saying that to me? Because in that time in the mid to late 90s, you got married, you had children, and you were still in that era of not really having, the choice of a career and a child. And I did go the marriage route and I did lose who I was for a little bit. But interesting enough, I was proud to say that I reclaimed that. It just took a little bit of time. And so I think part of the imperfection piece is allowing time to help figure out who you are and what you're willing to accept.
Ooh, ooh. And the perfectionism, there's kind of like two facets to it of perfectionism of fitting into
Sure.
a made up ideal of
Yep.
like you should fulfill this identity of being a wife and a mother
Right.
and maintaining this like kind of social identity, but doing your part
Yeah.
in society to raise the next generation at the expense of yourself.
Right.
And there, but like do it perfectly is kind of
Mhm.
this really interesting recipe. So I'm so happy you touched on that because I feel like that is ultra relatable to people. So how did that happen? That how long did it take? Like what was the catalyst of reclaiming this part of yourself, this creative part who's now out there and doing like super fun stuff all over Pittsburgh?
I don't know that I have fully yet. I think it's still a work in progress. And I think that just when I think that I may be confident in what I'm doing, something changes because it's life, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at that mid 90s, I got married in 2000. Um I then was very quick to think about, well, what is next? I was working at the Tribune Review, and I changed jobs, and those jobs didn't work out. I ended up staying home with my kids for a bunch of years, and I didn't really like re-enter the media world until 2015, and it was actually in public relations because I wanted to learn that side of it. And at that point in 2015, I was working for Markowitz Communications, which was a fantastic job. And I was learning how media was changing and how PR had an element to media. And those few years in that industry really helped me to understand it, get my feet. It's all 100% helped me to figure out who I was and where I was meant to be. And I think knowing that my kids were in school and that I could sort of check that box that like they were good, they were being educated and things were good, I then was able to start that journey piece. And so once I started in that journey piece, got my feet under me, met John of YaJagoff. He was the only podcast in town at the time because Pittsburgh, we were doing these ebbs and flows of what a podcast was.
Hmm.
We had like minds, and it made sense to be together
Hmm.
in a time when people were sort of like testing the waters of doing things on their own.
Hmm.
And so we partnered in 2017. And it's crazy because actually this November will begin the ninth year of YaJagoff Media. And it's crazy to think that this is where we are, because it literally was like, well, let's do some PR and marketing work together, and I'll co-host this podcast. And this podcast became this pop culture thing in Pittsburgh that I never thought would happen. But it also provided a voice for so many different people. And I think that was the first change where I realized, one, it was showing that women had a unique place in storytelling in journalism, which is what my degree was in. Two, you could balance work and life because we were working from my house, and I was able to say, my kids are good. I'm now figuring out who I am, what's next. And number three, to kind of show that things are constantly changing. And what is a podcast? And now this thing is here and it's sticking around. And how does that sustain? And so then from there it was like, how do we continue to grow this thing and give Pittsburgh a place for small businesses to thrive, for community collaborations to happen, for people who maybe didn't have the budget to get the notoriety on television or radio, they could come on and we could show people who they were. And they believed in us as much as we believed in them. And I think that was really how YaJagoff was able to grow and honestly become. I just talked about this at a Point Park student led like symposium where we said the term jagoff has a negative connotation. So that in itself was this barrier of, how am I proving myself for this imperfection piece, right? I'm never going to be perfect, accepting that, okay. But now I have this new battle that I have to prove to people that we're legitimate, that it's a real thing and that it's a Pittsburgh thing. And, I still think there's times when people go, oh, and we have to remind them it's a term of endearment because it encompasses all things Pittsburgh and the transformation that Pittsburgh has had. So I think it's unique to sort of see this whole imperfection theme come full circle in my line of work throughout the years.
Ooh. So I'm curious, with the imperfection,
Mhm.
did did that ever, what did that look like for you when before you jag off? Like, did it prevent you from starting certain things or putting yourself out there? Or like what was the way that it showed up?
The fear of imperfection, that
Yes,
fear.
yes, yes.
Um, I think I think imperfection is in the perception of who you're talking to. So for me, my battles began with imperfection in the sense that I come from a music family. My father was a very well-known musician, Johnny Angel and the Halos here in Pittsburgh. And, I always say my dad did not intentionally have this like need for our family to be perfect. The community did, right? And so we were always in the public eye.
Mhm.
And so it was constant like, you're on, you're on, you're on. And so I think it started there. And again, not intentionally. It was not my parents saying like, do this, do that. it was just the fact that life was going, and we were constantly meeting these unique people. If the Temptations were in town, if Chuck Berry was in town, we were with them.
Mhm.
And so our pictures were everywhere. And so that started this whole, like, I better watch my P's and Q's because you just don't know. Um, Again, I don't think it was ever implied. It just was my own sort of take on it. And then as I got older, I definitely continued to have body image issues because I was never thin enough, in my opinion. Again, growing up in a time, we talk about social media and the things that kids are seeing today that give them body image issues, through unfortunate algorithms. But there's certainly a likeness in the 80s and 90s of the magazines we were looking at and the people that we were, implied to emulate. Again, no one said to do it, but it was this, like, wow, I don't look like that.
Yeah.
I look very different. I just got done saying, like, I think it's refreshing today to see the acceptance. Um, and I don't like the word acceptance because it shouldn't be that, but the mainstream of being a little overweight, a little thicker than others. I love that. I love the confidence that women have in their own bodies. And it was not like that back then because, there was this recognition of, okay, I need to be a certain way because I'm in the public eye. I need to look a certain way because I'm in the public eye. And then there was this unsaid pressure of, my dad was this icon who knew what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. I was very fortunate because I've said this to you before. It was something I inherited where it was natural progression. We were among these people all the time. I learned how to hold a conversation. I learned how to be engaging. I learned how to read a room. I learned how to feel comfortable with someone who was black, who was brown, who was, not like me, who was, gay, um, unfortunately, maybe battling a drug addiction, something like that. I learned those elements of people and didn't even know it was happening. And so to me, those were gifts that were given to me. And I learned again with time how to implement them into my life. But I think this imperfection piece was always looming because I was in the public eye in some capacity. And then and honestly, Steph, at some point something clicked where I said, this is what it is. I've been in the public eye. How do I utilize that lack of fear of being in the public eye to kind of come into my own? And so I've embraced it more and I've accepted these imperfections of, I've told this a million times. At 39 turning 40, I read something about Alicia Keys not wanting to wear makeup anymore. And
Mhm.
while she was much younger than me, I quit wearing makeup 10 years ago and have not done so since. And I'm proud of that because it's this showing of acceptance that, you know this is who I am. And it's okay. It's okay to be a little thicker. It's okay to not put makeup on. It's also okay to do so, but for me, it was sort of this acknowledgement of acceptance.
Oh, I am so glad you're sharing this because that I feel like a lot of women will understand these subtle threads that you've pieced together through your life,
Sure.
that it's all of the that it's so wonderful that you're getting this experience from media, but you're feeling this pressure from a very
Sure.
young age to look a certain way, to be a certain way,
Yep.
and then that shows up in some life choices, and eventually something clicks of doing YaJagoff that's
Right.
like, okay, this really allows me to be totally myself. And even like then Pittsburgh to be totally itself because Pittsburgh has this rustic quality to it
Right. For sure.
that when we embrace is like Pittsburgh is the best city in the world. Pittsburgh is home for us. So this is the subtle pieces of it, the undercurrents of it are just like a really gorgeous example of what that can look like that for you. So it sounds like the moment was, oh, I want to be me. I want to use my past. I want to use what I had for my benefit, but also
Right.
be me. What did that feel like And what does it feel like when you have that?
Again, it's crazy because I don't think it was ever intentional. It just sort of happened. And as it was happening, I was like, aha. So that's that learning moment.
Yeah.
I think that as I was 39 and turning 40 and transitioning into, this new, I remember saying to my dad, I love this PR job, but I just feel like I don't have enough time to myself. And he was like, start your own.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, that's silly. I'm going to be 40.
Mhm.
And, I'm now at this point where my kids are good and I can sort of have this balance. And then I was like, you know what? You're right. And it's so ironic to me because, again, launched PittsburgHER at 49. Like there's some weird thing with these nines. I don't know what's going to happen at 59. I'm scared. But, it's just interesting to look at the natural acknowledgement, because again, I don't like that acceptance word. I like it when it's a positive thing, but I don't want it to be like, oh, I accept you. It's about how you accept yourself. And I think that you have to allow that time.
Mhm.
I think at 39 turning 40, my daughter was a factor. There was a 6-year age difference between my oldest and my youngest. And I didn't want her to feel that she was getting the shaft because mom decided that she wanted to, figure herself out at this point. I also then gave myself grace to say, look, no matter what it takes, you're going to be there for her. So why not test the limits and see, can you do both? And then I just kept going, and so then it was a couple of years later that somebody approached me and said, why don't you run for school board? Like you seem to be a natural leader and you're community based. And I was like, huh, okay, well, let's think about that. And I ran for school board while my daughter was leaving elementary school and going to middle school, and I had a child in each grade level, a high school, the middle school, and the elementary. And I thought, man, what am I getting into? And then it's again one of those things where I completed the 4 years and I was like, I need to do more. So I'm gonna run again, and so test those limits. What can I do? At midpoint of John and I partnering, it was people asking us, what do you think? How did you gain this sustainability? And we were like, we're not young people in a technological world. And so we had to learn it all. And so that was what sort of clicked and said, okay, you are doing this podcast, you're on a school board. What's the other element? Well, there's this agency side to us where we are implementing public relations, community collaborations, marketing, um, social media for 20 plus clients now. And so people don't realize that. We just kept adding people to our repertoire. We have 13 people who work with us now, and they serve as account executives. They're the content creators for various companies like Mancini's and Jenny Lee and the Rorick brand and UPMC Stat Medevac. I mean, it just runs the gamut because I kept testing that limit, of course, with all the right people surrounding me. It was never about me. It was always about, is my family in check? Is my husband good with this? Is my business partner ready for this next level? The ancillary people who supported it, does this all make sense? And how can I continue to test those limits to do good and hope that it makes changes? And again, it was time that sometimes you don't know that when you're in the thick of it, that you are accepting this change, that you are becoming this new person. And I think that's where it is now. And that's why I recently had this like sort of look back where I was like, 49 is so different than 39. But um here we are thinking that Pittsburgh needs a women panel podcast to talk about raw women things that are awkward to talk about, if it's not just you and your girlfriend. And so I find myself there, even generationally, as I spoke mumbling in the beginning, generationally looking at 4 people younger than me, um, and how we perceive situations, whether it's equitable pay, whether it's culture dysfunction, whether it's people not feeling comfortable in a room with somebody who doesn't look like them, things like that, and talking about them openly so that, again, we can make a positive change.
I love it. I love it. And as I'm listening, I've when I hear it as a listener, I feel like oh, you fully accepting yourself, maybe even committing to be yourself, but like whatever that looks like for people, whether the best word is acceptance or commitment or
Sure.
like this is it, this is me. It sounds like that facilitated within you and then externally all of these opportunities to open
Correct.
up and keep sharing with community.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're saying correct. So is there anything that you would add to that or share with others about the benefit of choosing to be you?
Again, I don't think you realize it until you're allowing it to happen. So many times people are afraid to take the risk, right? And so it's interesting because my husband and I, this is something that we instill in our children in their adult years, right? I have one in college who I have two in college, but one who is at the final point, and deciding what he wants to take on as his job, and he's going to go into architectural engineering, and he's like trying to see, what job do I accept? And my answer was, what have I told you for the last 20 some years? Do what your gut tells you. Your gut's not always right, but go with what your gut tells you and then make the most of that decision. And that's literally what it is, right? Because if you don't know what would have been. So don't think about that. Easy to say. We're
Yeah.
human. It's a human element to say, what if I had, that kind of thing. But I think that was my motto. I know that was my motto through life. And it was my husband's, and it was John, my business partner's. And so we would say, we know what mistakes we made, but we accepted them because they were part of the journey. You have to fail to succeed. It sounds so cliche, but you have to make that decision and go, that one wasn't the right one, or it didn't work out the way I thought it would, but here's how it worked out, and that led to the next thing. And
Mhm.
so I think that's where we are, is you have to just say, at this time, this was the best thing to do, and this is what I'm making of it. And as these things unfold, um, you embrace them and you just figure out how to make them work, or you correct them. And if you follow your gut, I just truly think you're never going to fully not move on, because you're taking that risk, you're accepting that it's happening, and you're waiting to see what's next so that you can just fulfill whatever that next piece is. And it is unknown, and that's the scariest part. But you have to believe that somehow, some way, it's going to work out.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing this. So we really got a lot of releasing the fear of imperfection and that being tied to choosing yourself and what all goodness can come from that. So thank you, Rachel, for sharing.
You.
For people who are like, you sound super fun and I want to learn more about you and follow you. I know a lot of listeners will already know of YaJagoff, but for those that don't, how can they find you? And are there any final things you want to share with the audience?
I want to thank you because there are so many platforms for podcasts, for storytelling, for audio and digital means of communication. And, I think that you underestimate yourself on what you bring out in people. And I learned that upon my first meeting with you. And I appreciate that you are a people person and that you bring good out in people. So thank you for doing this, because it's super cathartic for other people, more than you realize. So thank you for that. But I would be so grateful if you want to follow along on all the social platforms for YaJagoff. It is a lot of fun. But also PittsburgHER. You can go to yajagoff.com and find all of our episodes of PittsburgHER, or Pittsburgh Magazine's website for PittsburgHER. But yajagoff.com is probably the best hub to find our blog posts, to find our podcasts, and to see all the fun things happening. But thanks for what you're doing, Dr. Steph. We appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. We'll have all those links below. And remember to be you. Take care.